Welcome to the True North Compliance Podcast, where we discuss regulatory and compliance issues for Canadian business.
Hello, I'm Sean O'Hara, and thanks for listening. This week's podcast is more of what you could consider a pilot or a first launch. This is a conversation I had with John Juricic. This is the very first in the Sidney Breakfast Club After Hours series. I've already had 2 podcasts about that topic, or within that series rather, on this podcast. These are a series of live stream YouTube broadcasts that we have with a guest speaker. This first one, we were kind of trying out the tech in my studio and in John's studio, doing it over Zoom, doing it over YouTube, looking at how we would manage the live chat, how we would handle the delays and so on, and also just conversing about what the topics that we will cover and why we're doing it and the state of things happen. And I've taken that YouTube stream and the other ones and converted them into audio because my preference is audio. Some people love having video content, video podcasts. I prefer audio, which is why I have an audio-only podcast. This True North Compliance podcast is audio only, because I like to be out and doing things when I have a podcast on, not looking at a screen. And with my phone, if I have a video podcast and I turn off the screen, because often the phone's in my pocket or it's in a bag or something and it's out and I've got the headphones, the audio shuts off. That's a reason that I like audio podcasts, and I've taken these podcasts and converting them into audio. There will still be a link in the show notes for this particular video if you want to go to YouTube and watch it there. The Sidney Breakfast Club meets in Sidney, which is about a half-hour drive north of the city of Victoria, British Columbia, on Vancouver Island. For those of you who are long-distance listeners, if you're ever in the area, I suggest you come by. I encourage you. Right now we meet on the second Wednesday of the month, 7 till 8:30, and there's speakers, guest speakers. Sometimes there's panel discussions. Sometimes there's demonstrations. Always very informative, whatever the topic. Tends to have more of a, let's say, tech manufacturing industry focus, although we've also been touching on the recent issues with the tariffs, food security, and so on. It's been a great pleasure to do this series with John, who I've known since the late 1990s. So here we go which is actually the first episode, number 1, you could say, of the Sidney Breakfast Club After Hours series. And thanks for listening, and I hope you enjoy the show.
Sean and I are launching a new live stream series on industry activity on the Peninsula. And we are just figuring this out. So first of all, my name is John Juricic. I'm with Sean O'Hara, and I own a company called Harbor Digital Media. And we are very, very active in digital training solutions and have been active in digital marketing. And Sean, allow me, you can go ahead and introduce yourself.
Yeah, I have a marketing agency called Agency 2525. I started the web stuff in 1995, and through a few different companies, and then finally gave up the web design industry last year for a variety of reasons I won't go into here, to launch this, to focus much more on marketing and direct response marketing and marketing that generates results for a few different industries.
You and I go way back. I think we met in the late 90s through various networking clubs back then. When networking was very hip, was new, wow, well, we're going to go network. So you and I go back a ways.
I think it was probably 96. Could have been 96, 97.
Right?
That's a long time.
And you still have hair, and I do not.
Yes, I do.
The blind.
Yeah.
So,
I
okay. So, we've been through a lot of stuff. You and I done a lot of community stuff, one of which is I manage a group, a networking group, as it turns out, called the Sidney Breakfast Club. That is a Peninsula-based industry networking group that meets once a month, except for the summer. And we have speakers, and we talk about how to learn from each other, how to run our businesses, how to avoid mistakes, how to grow our businesses, everything around growing the business. The club itself has been in existence since early 90s. It was a part of, sort of intertwined with Viatech at that time, and in the early days helped establish the marine tech industry, some of which those companies are still attending our session.
It's quite an eclectic mix, I could say, because I like the way you have us go around the room and state who we are and where we are. And there's a mix of manufacturers, of engineers, of students who come occasionally. I don't know if I won't call them parasites, but it comes to mind of the people like us, the marketers who are there to try to get business.
Well, it is a natural part of networking that there are folks there that to some are frustrating, but it's part of doing business. And there are very polite ways to say, thank you, but I'm not interested. I already use those services. So
another thing I'll point out too is when people go around, there's also a good chunk of retired people. So there's a ton of knowledge in the room.
Yes.
And as a marketer, I always try to keep my eye or ear out for friction. What is slowing people down? And there's so many acronyms. And sometimes I'm there and I realize, okay, the people in this room understand what he or she just said. And sometimes I say to myself, that sounds impressive. I have no idea what that is. It's a lot of letters.
Well, we would have speakers attend, and they were from companies, and they would review with us the ups and downs, and we would try to learn from that. But then somebody became inaugurated in January of this year and really turned the economic tables and ripped them out from under our Canadian business establishment. And since then, we have been trying to figure out how to operate a business in this new world. And so we started having monthly panels of businesses reacting to the new tariff war. Okay. And we did that for about 4 or 5 months, I think, since maybe February. Yeah. And interest has exploded at the Sidney Breakfast Club. And there's been a huge amount of desire to have follow-up and to collectively as a community deal with these issues. And we'll review some of those, Sean, you and I, during this session, but this became a natural extension of that. So we're going to do these live interviews, maybe weekly. We'll see what we can handle, Sean. We'll have guests, and we'll continue the conversation on how business is reacting successfully and not successfully to the tariff wars. And so we ended up with a meeting last week. That's really where this initiative came from. That meeting was attended by about 70 people, which is now average for the monthly meeting. And the speakers were the executive director and deputy director of the South Island Prosperity. I called it a project, but partnership. Right?
Partnership. Yeah, you were corrected live.
So I thought we would spend a bit of time, Sean, reviewing what's been going on and what happened at that meeting. Start to share out what we think is going to happen. And so that's kind of my preamble. I'm not going to do that every meeting, that's for damn sure. So what do you think? What are your gut reactions after now 5 months of chatting about this stuff?
We got a kick in our complacency from down south. And I really like what Ray Brome said about we had this opportunity when the lockdown happened, which was 5 years ago, this month, 4 or 5 years ago, we were going through this process of the supply chain is disrupted. We have to innovate. We have to figure out where we're going to get our stuff, how we can stay in business. But we had such a strong push to go back. We wanted to go back to 2019. We wanted to go back. We used to say we go back to normal.
The way things used to be.
The way things used to be, which meant any of the innovation, any of the ideas we had, in a lot of cases just died because, hey, we're back. We're normal. We can give up the masks. We can leave our doors. We can touch people again. We can hug. So all of those things that we thought were great ideas, let's forget about them. We'll go back to the way things were. And now we got this big kick and we can't go back. Because even if they had a regime change down there, let's say, next week, things are not going to change because worldwide, a lot of things have been put. So the silver lining in a lot of this is that we are looking at newer ways of doing things, new markets, which we always should have been doing, continually staying on top.
That's a great summary. You know, I never actually, I suppose I did at some point, but I never heard it sort of really crystallized. Articulated like that. That's right. That the COVID thing, it was a shock. This is now a second shock for business in 5 years. And none of us are going, let's look back. In fact, there's been significant momentum to think of ways, how do we become more efficient? How do we become more productive? And how do we become more innovative? And frankly, Sean, you know, we made kind of a joke at the beginning around, boy, we've known each other for so. That used to be how Canadian business thought. I recall that was a real value add for Canadian business. That's what differentiated us. We didn't have the huge money coming out of Silicon Valley, for example, or the huge capitalization. But man, oh man, Canadians were productive and efficient and innovative. And where do we stand now? What are we, like about 100 in the world?
Yeah, it's horrible. And I felt like asking that during the talk. Why is our productivity so low? I don't know if it was early in our relationship, but 20 plus years ago, I was reading somebody who had been to some, let's say, venture capital events, I think, in the US and in Canada. And he was saying in the US, there's so much rah, excited hype. But in Canada, they're much more reserved, but they're just as excited and just as determined. And at some point, we
lost that. Didn't we? And so that's a great point. I think everyone in that room has decided they don't want to be that. They don't want to look back. They want to look forward. They don't entirely know how to do that, Sean. And so some initiatives have arisen, not from the Sidney Breakfast Club, but through the connectivity and energy. One of them being a Vancouver Island Manufacturing Efficiency Alliance. That's on LinkedIn under that title, and that group is trying to apply some lead. In other words, we're sort of resigned to the fact that we're going to lose a component of our marketplace from the U.S. And rather than boo-hoo about it, we're saying, is there a chance that we can improve efficiency internally to compensate for that loss? as well as trying to get new business. So that's happened. A lot of activity around Buy Local, around Buy Canada, which has all kinds of, emotional components to that, as it turns out. But there's that. There's a wish to work together.
Yes.
And we can see that with bees, but in fact, it's hard to work together, and it's hard to collaborate.
You mean? Oh,
As businesses, let's work together. Then you sit in a room and you don't want to share a damn thing. You don't want to open yourself up to new ideas. You don't want to recognize that the world has changed dramatically.
Right.
So this issue of change management, we've got to be willing to change, and that's hard, right?
Yeah. When I first heard the concept of VMEA, that the Manufacturers Excellence Alliance, I likened it to the mastermind principle that Napoleon Hill talked about. And lean, in a sense, when it's done within a factory or within a company, no, but when it's done with, say, not necessarily peers, but with other businesses that are not competing, where we can sit around a table and say, I've got this issue. How do I deal with it? How have you dealt with it? That brings in, for those non-engineer listeners who are more familiar with personal development and Napoleon Hill, that probably
that's fabulous. So, okay, there's a fabulous new energy. There is a willingness to change the way we do things. What actually do you see next? I mean, we've got a Canadian government elected saying we're going to be the best economy in the world. We're going to do this and that. There's old guys like me. There's a lot of skepticism around some of this stuff. Do you sense that there could be a breakthrough, and why?
I see a huge amount of skepticism because I guess political views change over time, and one's views of the role of government changes. And now my view is the government should get out of the way, basically. Because one of the big topics that's come up, and it was even before this year, and some of the earlier speakers, was some of the bureaucracy, I guess, that we've had to, or that they've had to deal with, and the red tape. And I know, and things are there for protection and environment and so on. But when they become a hindrance, or when we have to rely on governments for things, so the pressure would have to come from the businesses who will say, here's a great example that the Peninsula Chamber has been saying for a very long time, of how the cost of housing affects the ability for a company to function. And if we're losing companies and they're moving because people cannot live in this part, that's damaging to the economy. And then as they brought up on Wednesday, now it seems access to a family doctor is a competitive advantage or lack of an advantage. So people may think, business, they just want to make money. Well, they want people to have a place to live so that their workers can live. They want them to have access to doctors so that they can be healthy. They want to be able to pay them so they can afford to live here, which means their products have to sell. And they also want access to culture, because that's something that people are looking for too. We don't really have vibrant arts and culture
on the peninsula. I'll say that.
Yeah,
I've said that before. There is, obviously, but it's not vibrant.
Right.
And it's not, there's not a capacity. There's not a lot of it. Certainly the Mary Winspear Center is creating all kinds of it, but it's one center, right? It's important that a dialogue continues for industry to find ways that we didn't do in 2020, to find ways to adapt, to change, to modify, and build better, more efficient businesses. This will be part of that, okay? It'll be part of understanding the technology to do that. So, yes, so that perhaps we can have chats with people across Canada who are learning how to do this, and we can learn from them. And certainly folks in the Peninsula and Lower Vancouver Island region. So I'm really excited to be on this journey with you, Sean, and I really appreciate your understanding and me mucking around trying to figure out how this works.
Yeah, that's what I do. Thank you, John, for inviting.
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, my friend. Bye-bye.
Bye.